Jig Night. What's happening, peeps? The most consistent show on the interwebs. We're always on Thursdays, guys. We don't switch nights up. We don't jump all over the place. There's a couple other consistent shows too, but here we are, moving towards the end of the year. Mike Iovino's here tonight. He's already in the house. We're just chillaxing. Mike is, you guys, you gotta understand something. Mike Iovino, whenever he's on a show, he's down in the basement and he's always doing one thing when he's on a show. He's always tying. He's right in front of us right now, and he's already tying. He's just doing his thing, you know. Big Malone's in chat. What's happening, guys? Dave Richardson, welcome, guys. I'm sure everyone will start jumping in. It's the 7 o'clock hour. People know it's on. Yeah. So Mike Iovino is here tonight, and I'm excited because Mike does a lot of things that other people. Anthony, welcome, buddy. He does a lot of things that other people don't do, right? So yeah, everyone's used to hearing about bucktail and marabou, but Mike ties with a lot of different materials, and that's why I'm really excited to have him on tonight. So Mike, listen, introduce yourself, tell people about you a little bit, and let's get started, my man. Welcome to Jigsquad.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me. Sorry, I've had my head down here.
You're good, buddy.
Cranking away while I can. My name's Mike Iovino. I am a avid tournament angler, guide, captain, bass fisherman, fisherman in general, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm based in Connecticut. I have been tournament fishing for, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I'm 33, about to be 33. Mm-hmm. And I've been tournament fishing for 21 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Since you were a wee little lad.
Yeah, man. I was young.
That's good, dude.
And I got into tying jigs, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay.
Kind of took off from there into a bit of an infatuation.
And, isn't it? It is a thing, right?
It's wild. It's wild. I think it's an outlet for creativity for some people who want to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think there's really nothing quite like catching fish on something that you made. And then, for me, knowing that something that I made is, in my opinion, better than anything that I could purchase on the market.
Yeah, Mike. So you guys listen. So Mike and I were talking last night, and it was fun. Like, I almost wish I could have just gone live then. I was in the car picking one of my sons up from school. Brian Schmidt, what's up, buddy? And we're talking and kind of we're just having the normal jig talking discussion. And so Mike, playing off of what he just said, Mike was talking about why he started making his own jigs. And so when you first started, when you were buying hair jigs, right? And you were finding, go ahead and talk about this. You were finding that they just weren't meeting your needs.
Yeah. Well, I was buying jigs for a long time. I mean, like I said, I've been tournament fishing for 21 plus years.
Yeah.
The entire time I've been throwing a hair jig. I mean, I was introduced to a hair jig by a good buddy of mine. I was probably 13 or 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
You're talking about 20 years of fishing with hair. And so I've been buying them for a long time, and I been buying them for years and years. And, you get some where, it's the hair isn't, quite what you would like it to be. The action on it isn't what you would like it to be.
Sure.
But then through all these years of purchasing them,
yeah,
I'm one of those guys, like I have so much attention to detail in everything that I do, but being fishing. And I noticed one thing about every jig that I caught the crap out of them on over the course of that, 10, 12, 15 years of buying hair jigs.
Yep.
And I said, wow, they all have this exact characteristic to them. I want to make sure every single jig consistently has that characteristic to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out a way to do that. And that's the pattern that I tie every single jig with.
What would you what's the hallmark of that pattern of your jigs that you have kind of fallen on? Is it a volume thing? Is it a profile thing? How would you describe it?
It's a profile, it's a movement, and it's a unique way that the hair is splayed on the jig.
Got you.
And the motion that it creates, as well as the taper that it has.
You know, it's interesting you say that because a lot of times, in a lot of different discussions, last night, Mike. So I told everyone in chat. So Mike and I are on the phone last night chatting, and after we were on the phone, I got home, right, and then it's the kid pickup for tonight and everything else. But while this is all happening, one of my buddies who is he's a guide up in Wisconsin and like the Door County area, and so and then I'm in another conversation about tying jigs, right? And as a part of that, we start getting into like all different things about like hook balancing and all these different things. And a lot of the comments, is about analyzing other people and other jigs. And that's one of the parts of the topic that we were talking about was what does that jig do in the water? Like how does it cause it to fall? Is the jig balanced? Does it point forward? What changes that? And I think a lot of times, maybe if it's because somebody's not a tire, but I think a lot of times people don't think about that when it comes to hair and jigs.
Nobody
right?
who's out there who purchases jigs and fishes, like no regular bass guy out there is
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of guys think that you just slap hair on a jig and make it, big and bushy, and it's good to go. And
that's a good comment, Mike. Let me ask you this, because I over this past year of doing Jigsquad, I've asked this question a lot of times to people, and sometimes I make this comment, right? But let me ask you, and I know you make hair jigs, but you also will use some silicone material sometimes, right? If you're trying to make it look buggy. Yes, exactly. Right. And one of the things is, and I guess I never kind of got into going too heavy into some of the hybrid jig designs, right? But there are a lot of times, there was a point in time earlier in this year, and I would think it was in the spring, where in the jig scene or people that were starting to make jigs, there was a lot of talk about hybrid jigs. And there was like a crazy amount of material, like silicone and hair that would get slapped together. And to me, I'd look at it and I'm like, hey, cool, if that's what you want to make. But I don't think, for me, like I'm looking, I go, what was the thinking in terms of why you put that together the way you did? And I thought that it was kind of just fitting into that it's a hybrid, hair and silicone. And it's almost as if I feel sometimes when the industry starts to grow and expand, even for tires, I think that people aren't even sure why they're designing or starting to make jigs, because there's a lot of bass jig makers out there that make silicone jigs.
Yeah.
So if you're a silicone jig maker and you decide you want to make a hybrid jig, you can't just turn around and slap a whole bunch of bucktail in there underneath the silicone and say, here's my hybrid jig. You can if you want. But the thing is, that's the whole point of Jigsquad. And that's not my rule. It's saying, what is the purpose behind what you're designing? And that fits into like when you talk about rate of fall and you start tying a very certain way, so you're going to accomplish those features. I just think that transcends itself into everything else that you could do in the jig world, whether it's silicone and hair and combos, or it's just an accentuating to make like legs, make hair jigs look like they have legs or claws. It's just, that philosophy is extremely important. And I can't state that enough in terms of, for anyone making jigs, it doesn't matter whether you're not a hair jig maker and you're just a silicone jig maker, You should have that philosophy as to why you design the way you do.
100.
And that's why when everyone asks me about like the design, the flow, color, and design, well, to me, flow is everything, right? I want to know how it flows in the water. I want to know what the movement is in the water. And so, I don't know. That's why I put it in the order I did. And when I first started Jig Squad, there was that big debate of that all the time. But talk about, how long did it take you to go through that process of kind of finding that style of tying that just became your thing?
Oh man. I would say it took 3 or 4 years of continuously tying with a whole lot of failures thrown in there.
Oh, of
A
course.
lot of a whole lot of time staring at jigs in the water.
Sure.
It's and I think you made this comment yesterday, but it's like, it's amazing. It's like, I'm super critical of my work, and I look at some of the jigs that I tied 2-3 years ago, and I'm like, man, I'm way better now than I was then. And you were saying the same thing yesterday. You were like, man, I'm way better than I was last year. And
Even like my thread wraps for bucktail last year were like this wide, were this long, and my for bucktail are, they're much better. They're not perfect yet, but I've just made so many improvements.
yeah,
It is crazy. It's like it's okay. It's okay not being, the level of seeing what we see on pictures on Instagram.
sure, yeah,
Like, but
yeah,
you can't be afraid to do it. You got to be willing to do it, and you got to be willing to learn, what changes, right? And it's a feel thing. Like, you could say, all right, Murph, I'm going to walk you through some technique, right? And I could try it as much as I want, but until I feel it, until I get that rhythm down, you don't have it, and it's okay not to have it, but if you really want to tie and make things, you take that time to get better at it. And it's a pride thing too. you
yeah.
know you don't want the damn thing to fall apart. Let's be honest. That's, how many times have you had bucktail in your life and the bucktail comes out? I mean, it falls out. 3 years ago, Mike, 4 years ago, I bought a whole bunch of hot lips jigs, which is just it's a saltwater style jig head, a smiling bill. You call it a lot of different things. And I had bought them over the years. We used them for snook and all this different stuff. Well, I decided I was going to tie my own. Well, I tied those things up, and they were like 3/4 ounce and a half. That's what I made. And I was going to bring them on vacation. And then I go and start pulling the hair out. I go, I think I just pulled all the hair out on this bucktail on these big jigs. I had no idea what I was doing. And so, you learn in time, and you have to experiment. You have to listen and pay attention to techniques and simple little things people tell you. And you got to try. You got to learn. You have to do. You can't just, somebody can't just tell you and then it works. You got to get a feel for it. So, but
Yeah,
you've been making a lot of jigs. How many jigs have you ever figured out and calculated how many jigs you think you might make in a year?
in a year,
Yeah,
I don't know, probably
couple thousand,
probably 2,000. Yeah.
2,000. And and who knows what the heck the number is, right? Um, Adam Mihar in chat says that he taught Mike Iovino everything he knows.
What's up, Adam?
Adam's an awesome dude. I'm
I
a
fish,
big Adam, and I have kind of been around Instagram together for many years, or at least since we've been doing things on Instagram.
I fished with Adam. Man, I met Adam at the Valley Angler in Danbury, Connecticut. I
Oh, really?
fished with Adam when I was like 16, 15, 16, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Long time ago.
Adam made the comment. He goes, Instagram pics are fake. Remember, people only share their best content. That is definitely true, Adam. And
Yeah.
it's funny, Mike, because like when Adam says something like that, one of the things, like, you'll see once in a while, I'll post like a pic of just a jig with the paint on it. So there's no weed guard in it yet or whatever. I almost enjoy those pics more than the fancy pics sometimes, because I just kind of like, yeah, it's just the whole, it's like that down and dirty. It's like it's in the making process. Those type of pics to me are just like, I love that stuff. You know,
That takes a jig nerd. You know what I mean?
I'm a jig nerd. I have to be. I don't know how I would have done this.
And here are. I'm sure, and you're in good company if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so funny because you've been on other shows, you know, like I know you've been on with Travis and a couple of times, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, you know, it's like a lot of shows. I mean, it's good. I don't know. I mean, here's the thing: the more that goes around, and the more people are able to share the experience of who they are and what they are, is a cool deal. But I mean, for me, like you coming on Jig Squad, this gets it's just jigs. You know, everyone's here; they know what they're talking about. You
Right.
know, we're not talking about aliens or some other silly little thing or whatever. I gotta bust Travis's balls once in a while. All right, so let's talk about some materials because what the thing you tie with some materials that I have not spent a lot of time tying with,
Well, I'm
and
not a
so
guy with pretty much anything, and like, the reason why is because I experiment with a lot of different stuff to achieve
mhm,
different actions, right? And that's I think the coolest part about hair, fur, craft fur, all the materials that I tie with in general is that they all have different properties, and
mhm,
even like two foxtails are could be totally different from one another. Um, as
mhm.
far as the length, how soft the hair is in comparison, even sometimes how cellular the hair is. And when I mean cellular, I'm talking about the water absorption and
Mhm.
the water absorption causing that hair to move in the water and how it causes it to move in the water.
Got you.
So, the synthetic stuff is totally, everything is completely different from one another. So that's like a mad search to find like this stuff, like
Right.
you gotta search high and low to find the really good stuff, and once you find it, you gotta buy the crap out of it because the next of it won't be the same.
Especially now, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, man. I mean, I've talked about this before, but like Punisher stuff used to be like the bomb, and that completely changed. And
You mean the stuff you'd get? Did you say Punisher?
Punisher, yeah, Punisher
Dude,
crap.
you know, it's so funny you say that. You're talking about like the craft fur and stuff that you get from Punisher jigs.
Yep.
So that was some of the first craft fur that I started tying with, and I still have some down in the basement. And I think last spring I pulled some out and I went to go make something with it after I was playing around with different colors. I had black and purple,
Yep.
right? Those are the two colors I had of the Punisher hair. And I'd made things with it, whatever, and I didn't think much of it. And then I was tying with some other colors, and then I kind of went back and said, "Oh, I'm going to tie with some black." Well, I had gotten new black craft fur, and the hairline stuff and everything else. And I went to go use the Punisher stuff. I go, "Oh boy, this is different," you know. And I've tied tons of jigs with their stuff in time, but it's just there's different quality of stuff out there. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. Things are continuously changing as far as that's concerned. I mean, even some like rinky dink craft store, you could walk in and find some stuff that's awesome. Um, you can even find stuff that you think is going to be awesome, that feels right, that looks right, and then you put it in the water and it looks like hot trash.
Yeah,
So,
right.
so it takes a lot of experimenting to figure stuff out. But I mean, for the most part, um, you know, 90% of the jigs that I will fish in my area of the country are either a combination of fox, whether it be Arctic fox, red fox, um, foxtail, uh, and the good synthetic materials that I've found.
Mhm.
Um, but there's a lot of different stuff you can tie with to get different actions. Like uh, I tie with bear a lot too, and bear is like a much stiffer material. Let me see if I can find it for you here.
See, this is good, Mike, because I'll be honest with you. Like I've I keep telling myself that I want to try and tie with some bear, right? This is one of the things. I've listened to enough people, I've heard enough people say that, and I just don't have any experience with the material. So I
Yeah,
said that's one, to be honest with you, that was one of the materials that I was excited to talk about tonight.
sure.
Uh, to have people hear about this. So it's stiffer material.
It's
Uh,
stiff. It's not as stiff as bucktail is.
okay.
You can see that's a little patch of bear here.
Yep.
Some nice longer stuff that I had found and got cut off of a larger piece. Um,
Mhm.
but it's not quite as stiff as bucktail, but it's definitely not, you know, as billowy or flowy as, I mean, this is synthetic stuff. I mean, you could see,
Sure.
if you could see next to one another, it's definitely very different. A lot less flowy, a lot stiffer, and so the properties of this hair are going to be totally different. It's not as cellular; it's moisture wicking. You know, it's not gonna be billowing in the water. It's got a very very subtle movement to it, and that's why it works in really cold water.
Okay.
Um, and it also it does very well if you're trying to mimic some of the antenna or appendages that a crawfish has. Working this material into a jig that's tied with fox, with a synthetic material, and putting it in the right place, because
Great.
placement is everything now. So putting it in the right place and having it cut to the right length,
Yeah.
um, you can do some very cool stuff with this. And so that's kind of, it
That's
kind
a
of
great comment. That kind of helped me a ton, to be honest with you. And to be
it brings my methodology when it comes to tying. Like, a lot of guys tie jigs. A lot of guys who are out there who are really really successful tiers. The stuff you see on Instagram, the stuff you see, you know, that's like amazing, and it looks so realistic. That's not what I go for personally. What
Mhm.
I personally go for is lifelike action. I tie to catch fish first and foremost.
Sure.
Like, I'm not knocking what anybody out there does. There's some stuff out there that is just absolutely gorgeous, and I don't know
Mhm.
what they're doing, and I'm nowhere near as good as those guys are when it comes to like getting the eyes and, you know, spraying bars on stuff, for lateral lines and gills and things like that.
Sure.
That lifelike stuff is cool. Uh, but I'm looking for uh, my jigs to achieve a specific action.
Mhm.
The combination of certain hairs, certain furs, on a jig head, um, can create entirely different actions and appeal to fish in different moods, appeal to fish that are eating different forage. Uh,
Mhm.
and so having a really keen understanding of the difference between, like, this is fox right here. This is it's really long fox, but it's kind of stiff. Um, and it's totally different from like the Arctic fox, like you see here. Like, this is super. It's almost like marabou esque, right? And you see this fox, which is a lot stiffer than this one.
Mhm.
It kind of looks like bear a little bit, right? But
Right.
not going to act the same at all.
Interesting.
Not going to act the same. Not even a little bit. Um, so it comes down to experimentation, um, and just having that knowledge from years of working with different materials and using them and putting them in the water,
Yeah.
determining what you're going to put on what jig, and what you want to combine to create specific action. And that's what I love about
Yeah.
tying.
Mike, so George Vol asks, he goes, ever try Icelandic sheep?
I have not. I
No,
have
and I've heard people talk about this. I've never used it.
not tried Icelandic sheep. I did, however, just get in goat hair for the first time.
I'm excited to hear in time what that actually turns out to do.
I haven't put it in the water yet. I have no idea how well it is going to work, but it is super super long. Um,
That's the thing that intrigues me about this.
It's super long. It's the beard from a goat, man. It's crazy looking, and it's pretty soft too, which makes me think,
Oh my God, look at that.
doesn't that look dope?
You know what that reminds me of, Mike? It reminds me of the guys that post the bucktails with a long
Yeah.
streaming tail on. I don't know what that material is that they use.
So usually, like guys who are tying those long bucktails, I know a lot of guys use like EP fibers,
Yes, sure.
and I mean that's awesome. I tie a lot of chatterbaits and spinnerbaits with EP fibers.
Yeah, have you heard me say what I did? I contacted, and everyone says it's not the same thing, but a lot of people tell you it's really darn close, and I love it. But I contacted the company that made the you ever hear about people making their own and brushing it out
Yeah,
with the Bonnie braid?
yeah.
I did that, and I contacted the company, and I got about 30 different colors of Bonnie braid. I have enough of that stuff to last me 5 lifetimes of every color known to man, but I like it because I just use it instead of buying EP fibers. And guys, if you EP fibers or synthetic fibers, for anyone who doesn't know in chat, it's basically I would compare it to it's a poly, yeah. It looks like that. You know, it's a
I got
synthetic fiber preacher style on the fly saying for Icelandic sheep. Great for longer jigs, 4 to 6 inches or longer. Think preacher
that.
style.
Oh,
Yeah, that makes sense. On the fly. Here, let me highlight. Let's see. What's he say? Sheep is great for longer jigs, 4 to 6 inches or longer. Yeah. Think preacher style. Yeah, it makes sense. Um, it's really interesting. So um Colby, are you joking? Is there something? I mean, you talking like a woolly mammoth? Well, he goes, what about mammoth hair?
yeah.
Woolly mammoth. You can get that to make your hat for the water buffalo lodge, I think sometimes. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because those patches of bear,
Yeah.
Colby, I know, buddy. I'm teasing because I'm laughing about what you said. Um, those patches of bear, every time I look and I see it somewhere, and I go, am I gonna get it? And I go,
But then
look at that little old patch. I go, how much is
you
that?
got
How,
cold
how much is
water
that gonna last?
on. You got
That's
cold
what I
water.
think.
I do, man. I can only use bear like by itself.
Mm-hmm.
Bear's by itself is best when that water's under 50.
Cold water, like you were saying.
Under 50, and I mean really honestly like 45.
Right.
um
Cold.
yeah, that's when bear by itself really shines. And
Mhm.
once it gets into the upper 40s, 50 and above,
Sure.
I'm working it in the stuff, but I'm not using it by itself.
I understand. And you had described that a little while ago. All right, listen, talk to me about Silver Fox, because I know you love to tie with this stuff.
Silver
And
fox.
and yeah, let me make you big again here so we could see this.
That's some fluffy, some cool stuff. I love so silver fox. I really love for bait fish patterns that it gives that natural kind of like shad gray, and
Mhm.
I love the transitions in this stuff, man. It is so
Sure.
it just moves from like that darker gray, as you can see, like towards the root, almost black, to then the white, and then back to the black in the tips. And I think it just does a really, really dope job of
Mhm.
mimicking bait fish. So whenever I'm trying to mimic bait fish specifically, uh,
Mhm.
I tie a jig called Smoke and Mirrors.
Okay.
Smoke and Mirrors, and it's got I actually got one right here. It's got
Oh, there we go.
blue
Oh,
in
let me.
it.
Oh, I love it.
It's got that blue in the center of it, and in the water, this looks so sick. It's that's caught a lot of fish, and a lot of guys who fish specifically for fish that are targeting bait will order those from me.
Mike, if people want to get your stuff, what you sell to the public? I know why you're laughing, but I'm gonna make you say it anyway.
Kinda. So I don't know. I'm not really like into the labor of love that it takes
Right.
to tie, more than. So I go through probably like on the low end 400 from myself personally, because I got
Sure.
spring too. So I'm just like I'm counting rocks with the jigs that I throw up here. So like I'm not throwing marabou and reeling it up in the water column where I don't have to ever worry about it snagging on the bottom. I'm
Right.
trying to get stuck in rocks when I'm fishing with hair jigs, usually here in Connecticut and in New York,
Mm-hmm.
Massachusetts, and wherever else I fish. So that style of fishing, man, I go through so many jigs, it's not even funny. Um, and because of that, like I go through so many for myself, my tournament partners and
Sure.
people and stuff like that. So if you're lucky, I'll tie for you.
You're just you have an established group of clients that you kind of tie for, and you don't have the capacity to keep adding more people. You're just not an
Well,
open
right.
commerce place.
Normal circumstances, I would say yes, but um, life is pretty hectic right now. I got 2 kids
Sure.
under 2, so
Yeah, it's busy, dude. So you guys listen, you guys can check out too. All the links are down below in the description. But I mean, Mike is on Instagram is fishing with Weensy, and you should, subscribe, follow along. Um, he has got the sickest logo. Uh, he's got the sickest logo out there. And here, let me make you big again here, Mike. Look at Mike's hat. It's like Mike. It's like Michael Iovino Jordan.
it's
And
it's me dunking a bass, dude.
it's dunking a bass. And I don't know if anyone noticed, but in the thumbnail for the YouTube show, I posted on Instagram, the background is like a sunset, and in the
He's
sun,
the sun.
I put the Mike dunking a bass in the background. So I don't know, man. It's just kind of fun. All right. So these are some cool things, Mike. Um, so what else? What else was I going to ask you? Okay, so that's
Okay.
Arctic Fox. And what about other materials that you like to use? Like what's some of your common
Um,
Mike jigs that you like to make?
stuff again. I mean, there's foxtail. Um, there's again the synthetic stuff, which
Sure.
it comes in so many forms. It's not even funny. I work bucktail into a lot of my jigs, depending on. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but some, depending on if I'm looking for a pop of color or something that's a little stiffer. Sometimes I do tie just bucktail. Again, the regular old fox body.
Yeah,
Uh, and as you know, most guys on here probably know body and tail are totally different and act
sure.
differently, and have different length to them. Uh, let's see, what else? I started tying with possum kind of recently. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool
What
stuff.
about talk to me about any coyote?
Coyote, yeah, yeah, I tie with coyote. Let's see if I can find it. I know I got it right here. Look at that.
I
That took
I
me.
of,
That took,
of all the
look at that. It's right there.
it just so happened to be right there. Imagine that on a jig show that it just happens to pop up right there with Mike Iovino.
I do. My time bench is a dinner table
There
from
you go.
some time ago, and I like this thing is covered with different materials. It's crazy. Um,
That's great.
I got this is coyote. It's coyote's kind of shorter, a little stiffer, nice for smaller crawl patterns and stuff like that. Good for a lot of Susquehanna guys. I tied a jig called Coyote Craw, and it's that with some flash in it, some gold flash, and a couple of strands of orange bucktail. And
Okay.
a lot of Susquehanna guys really like that.
Okay.
I'm sure they're trying to mimic little crawfish,
Sure.
uh, but it's a nice. It's got some nice properties to it. Not as it's on the shorter side for the most part. At least most of
Mm-hmm.
the coyote that I've ever gotten seems to be on the shorter side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a nice material for like layering,
Okay.
opposed to tying an entire jig out of coyote. It's a nice layering
If
material.
you wanted a short collar up top or something like that, you could put that up there. I get what
Yeah,
you're saying.
nice little puff, little volume. It affects how the fall rate. It does some cool stuff. I dig it.
Oh, here's a good question. Big Malone just says, what about Bobcat? Have you ever used Bobcat?
I've never used Bobcat. I have never used it. But I would. I would at least look at it. It's just never come across my. It's never come into my path. You know.
I was so excited, Mike, when I booked this show, and we booked a while back, right? Months back.
Yeah, it was a long time
But I
ago, man.
was so excited about this because I knew that this was going to be going into the winter for me. And I'm like, this is going to be great because I'm going to get a list from Mike of the stuff that I kind of want to pick up and play around with and tie some
Yeah.
things this winter and experiment with. And I really, I'll be honest with you, like in my heart, I kind of want to ask, like, hey, like what should I start with? Nah, I kind of just want to grab a little bit of all of it and put it in my hands and see what it feels like and see what moves me a little bit. You know what I mean?
You
And
got
I
like that.
think that will be my pathway to try some of these other materials. Bear definitely was on my list, but to be honest with you, I have in my head that I want to make shorter profile micro version bucktail jigs. Maybe
Okay.
maybe I would say I don't want to call your jigs micro, but I want to learn to tie with some of those smaller styles. So I'm not using, like, there's a different style for walleye jigs.
Yes.
There's a very, very sparse amount of material for some of these walleye jigs that you're vertical jigging. And then there's a different amount of bucktail for like saltwater stuff that I would be making, right? So I'm really intrigued. Um, I feel that I know enough tying techniques to be able to play around to get the volume and profile that I want. And so I'm excited. I kind of want to play with that. Brian Wisniewski, here's some other ones coming out to you. So we had Bobcat. Let's see what else are Wild Hog, elk hair.
Elk I've definitely used.
You've used elk. Okay.
Yeah. Again, not something that made its way into my repertoire full time. I was never a fan of how it moved in the water.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
but I've never used hog. Nope.
No groundhog. Interesting. Dedicated endurance says, and this is a very good question. Are you creating dubbing loops or just spinning material on the hook? Or let me add to it, dedicated endurance. I think it's the other option is layering material too. You're just laying it on and tying it in. Um, there are dubbing loops. There's all those options. I'm putting that out there to Mike. He's asking, are you creating dubbing loops or just spinning material on the hook?
I'm just layering materials. I layer materials, and so my standard jig that I tie, my pattern is a 4-step layering process. Where you're starting it just your typical style of tying, as far as getting the thread on the collar and building on that collar. Sometimes I'll start further down, sometimes I'll start further up, as far as towards the eye of the hook or away from the eye of the hook. But it's a layering process for me.
Good question.
Yeah.
Matt, South Jersey fisherman Matt says, how does squirrel hair look in the water on a jig? Is it hollow or solid? Another good question.
I've actually never used squirrel hair. A
I
lot of
haven't
guys
used it either. Does
never.
anyone know if I know Brian's in there. Wow, we got all the good animals coming out tonight. Somebody will know if squirrel hair is hollow or solid.
Guys definitely use it. I know that. I've
Oh,
just
they
never.
do.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
do. Here's let's see if anyone answers that question in a bit. But here's one from Omerta Tackle. He says, Weensy, do you like any specific material for keeping a jig on the bottom? Like how you say counting rocks. I'm a big believer of a sparsely skirted jig. I swear you can feel it better on the bottom.
Oh,
So
what a segue question.
yeah, is it? And Omerta, Evan Luda is crazy cerebral, right? He really is, and he really is thoughtful about jig design, right? And so when he says he hears you say counting rocks, and he's thinking in his head, all right, what material is that? And so that's a great question. So again, um, do you like any specific material for keeping a jig on the bottom?
So typically, the jigs that I'm using, if so, I use a lot of synthetic material for that counting rocks stuff.
Okay.
Synthetic materials that I'm using are usually
EP.
moderately cellular, I guess you could say. I'm not looking for something that's super stiff, but I'm not looking for something that's even going to be remotely similar to marabou. That I'll use those as the two ends of the spectrum, like bucktail versus marabou here.
Okay.
But what I will say is that you can always have more weight on a jig head. So I use a 1/4 ounce jig head like 90% of the time, depending on the depth of the fishing and the body of water that I'm fishing, or whether I'm fishing current or whatever. But Kenwood Lake, most of the lakes in my area, if I'm not fishing current, or if I'm fishing 10 feet of water or deeper, I'm using a 1/4 ounce head anyway, specifically to keep it on the bottom. Like, I want bottom contact all the time. Um, so certain materials are going to make that easier with a lighter jig head. So if you want to talk about, like, using less cellular materials, less billowy materials that are going to have less float to them, that is a way that you can get away with a slower fall rate, but still keeping your jig on the bottom. So that's definitely a good way of thinking when it comes to certain jigs and certain patterns. What I'll also say is that it depends on the action that you want the jig to have and how much movement you want to impart on the jig. So that's why the materials that I use, I try to find that happy medium, and Fox really is a good happy medium material between the stuff that just doesn't move at all and the stuff that really billows. So
That's a good comment right there, is about like what, because they're extremes on different lengths and ends. But if you find that median that becomes part of meeting that profile that you like, or the weight and how much water it's gonna retain, that's a big deal.
yeah, and I,
Interesting.
it's about too how much action you're going to impart in that jig, because the whole thing for me, as far as hair is concerned and fur, is how do I achieve movement without having to move the jig? Because when you're fishing cold water, you want a very natural movement, but sometimes
Yes.
you gotta leave it right there. Like, fishing hair is like a super super intricate process, and for me, it's about getting the jig exactly where it needs to be and keeping it there right in front of their face until they eat it.
Cold. You're saying that for cold water or all water types, Mike?
I'm saying that for when I'm typically fishing a hair jig, which is cold water,
Got you.
winter and early spring.
Got you.
That using that counting rocks method that we were talking about.
Yeah. Mike? What would you say is the most exotic material you've worked with? Dark Man is asking.
I don't know, man. I've used all sorts of shit.
A lot of these things, a lot of people are saying a lot of things. Like, a lot of this is exotic because these aren't things that they're not as popular as the two bigs, as I call them, marabou and bucktail, right?
Yeah, I guess I guess I would say peacock, but it depends on what you call exotic. I
What
guess
you're using it for?
peacock's pretty cool. That's some cool stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like I like I mean hurl. You throw some hurl on for like a top flare coming off
Yeah.
or tailing material or undertailing. White whale asks, what material would you say is easy to work with? So white whale is a new jig maker,
Yep.
but he's interested in getting involved more and more things. He goes, what material is easy to work with, and what material is difficult to work with? That's a good
In my
question.
opinion, white whale, the easiest material to work with as far as jig tying is concerned is going to be Arctic fox. Arctic fox because it's super friendly as far as like sectioning it out. You do it with your hands. You can section out a piece and cut that off.
Yeah.
You can cut that right off and mold it and tie it. Whereas synthetic, man, I got a whole process with synthetic. It takes me forever to tie the jig that I tie for myself as far as the synthetic jig is concerned. Because man, I comb it twice because I'm insane. Uh, I cut and then I'm gonna pull all of the excess hair off of there, and then I'm gonna probably end up cutting it again depending on how long it is. Putting it up against the collar of the jig, seeing how long I want to get it. And I just really make sure that all those loose hairs, because synthetic stuff is so inconsistent in the length and stuff like that. You just want to make sure that you have that consistency as far as length is concerned and get out all those extra hairs. So
Interesting. Matt South Jersey Fisherman is saying, what combo of hair or single type of hair would you use for making a jig that would be bulky, almost to the point of covering the hook to the barb when wet?
when wet,
Interesting. So condensed, right?
you
So
can do that with a lot of stuff. It's
yeah.
a matter of how much you're willing to put on there. I mean, you can even, I mean, other than marabou, because
You see, here's the thing. If you want to cover the point of the hook and the barb, you still got to maintain a little bit of volume, or you have to, because like you tie a marabou jig when it gets wet is going to be almost as it's going to thin down if you're retrieving, right?
a lot.
Almost to the size of the shank, but to
Yep.
cover the barb tip, you need something that has volume to it. So sometimes some synthetic materials like EP fibers are good for
Yep.
creating a volume in bulk. Bucktail, you might be able, depending on how much bucktail is being used, but you need something that is you have to have a larger body profile that it's going to maintain itself and not retain water. Because when things retain water is when they tend to condense, man. Right. So synthetics help with that a lot. But it's tough to say you need a lot of material to say it 100% covers the hook, right? I mean, that's my comment. Mike, would you agree?
I 100% agree. No matter what you're tying with, you're going to need a lot of material in order to do it.
All right. So listen, I'm going to throw this out there. So on the fly tackle, Brian Tesh, who was on the show a few weeks back, right? He says, I give you permission to share my tip I shared with you a while back in regards to peacock curl. My contribution for the show tonight. All right. Now I got to go back and 100% look. I got all kinds of messages from work because I remember him. Actually, I thought he was going to tell me about another tip that he gave me. Now I got to go look. And I usually get like 7
I don't know
gazillion.
the opportunity that we had when Omerta asked this question. So real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
You asked a question that Coot and I were literally talking about last night, and I'm curious to poll everybody here to see what you would prefer. Okay. So
Great.
I'm particular about the pattern that I tie on my jigs. Okay. I've also caught fish on jigs that have this pattern, but super sparse with the hair. But when it comes to hair jigs, certain guys are very finicky and have their own opinions. So I'm curious. Super fluffy but not tied with a specific pattern, or extremely sparse and tied with a specific pattern? Which would you guys prefer? I'm intrigued.
So the two options are, say it one more time, the last part.
Super fluffy or not tied with a specific pattern, right? But I should say, but not tied with a specific pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Or extremely sparse, but tied with a specific pattern.
I have my answer already.
I mean, I'm sure, this is like an opinionated thing. Like some guys are super,
Oh, yeah.
oh God, I need a fluffy jig. And other guys are,
Adam Mahara, right out of the box.
Me. Yeah, Adam. I mean, that's my answer. I've had
That's
guys
mine too.
to get jigs tied with less material, specifically. The answers are coming in.
Gators is going sparse too. Bass and Big Malone, sparse.
Sparse. There you go. Yeah. I think I'm glad to hear that because okay. Brian's a fluffy guy.
Oh, look at this. Look at Omerta. Got to keep it on the bottom. So does that, Omerta, is that saying you want it big and fluffy? No, are you saying you want it sparse? Because big and fluffy will slow the rate of fall, but if it's a water retaining bait, it just depends.
Yep. Yeah, I'm intrigued to know.
That's a good comment by South Jersey fisherman Matt here. He goes, I guess because that's how my striper jigs are, right?
Yep.
Fluffy jigs are for weirdos.
Well, if that were the case, Adam, you would definitely be using fluffy jigs, my friend.
That's right. Look at Tom's in on fluffy. It's so interesting. This is such a great question, right?
Well,
look at the smart guy Eastham coming in here. I like the type that the fish will bite.
Yeah.
Keep trying until you figure it out. That's might be the best tip out there, right? Because different times are going to require different things.
Yeah, I will say there's definitely a time and place for a really puffy jig or when they seem to want more material. But man, I can't tell you. I mean, I've caught fish on jigs that are just beat to heck.
Look at the variance here, and people are actually giving good commentary added to it. That's so wild. Fall rate here's what I'll add to it. A lot of it has to do with fall rate, and I learned that from you would think I learned that from other means, but that's or locally. That's not true. I've learned that from studying jig tying from the East Coast striper guys. So just to comment on what Matt, South Jersey fisherman said earlier, from studying that and going on that forum Stripers Online, like that's where I learned about that years ago, was just talking about volume of material and changing rate of fall. And the other thing that'll change it is depending on current, right? So if you have current, that's going to change anything. Like you hear the East Coast guys, the striper guys talking about fishing the beach or the canals and talking about current and which ones they want in different locations. And so that's going to impact whether you're a river fisherman or you're fishing in a lake and keep in mind too, there's another factor. It doesn't have to be current that you always traditionally think is in a river. It could be windblown current as well. That's especially early season and late season. That's a big thing too. Yeah, good points. Anthony says, Brian Schmidt has made a believer out of me with sparse presentations. Yeah. I mean, Matt's further saying, I just wanted to throw in something with a larger profile, even with finesse, but the bucktails I got from Cuda are sparse. Should be interesting to show how it does. So Matt is one of the guys that won a bucktail from the giveaway on the show that was from the Test Boys on the fly tackle. And they are like, I call them walleye styled or thinner profiled bucktails, right? And they're just fantastically done. I mean, they're nice. The head painting jobs are done by Larry Hadley, which a lot of people know from coming on the show. And they're just that different style. And It's so interesting. Now, Matt, a lot of times what they'll use those jigs for, at least me and my friends, we snap jig them for walleye. That doesn't mean that you can't fish them 10 other ways as well. But it's just interesting to get a different type of jig in your hands like that. That's different than what you would be used to, especially for like the stripers and stuff like that. So very, very interesting. Shallow. And that's another point. So Matt also says they're shallow. That will dictate how people talking about how fast they want things to drop. So that's another good point. Will Perryman, how can you pass it by? He says, Mike, he says, Will Perryman's comment is Willie Bugger's still cracking them in the current. All these things are true. Everyone's coming out of the woodwork with some good discussion tonight. Mike, you still want to do what we talked about?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm all about it.
All right. So what? You go ahead and introduce it, and I'll get a hashtag ready. Tell them what you want to do.
So I figured we would do a giveaway tonight of some sort.
Cool.
I'll give away a dozen jigs to lucky winner. Kudo will create a hashtag for you guys, and whoever wins, you can DM me your address, and I'll get you out a dozen jigs.
That's crazy. A dozen jigs. That's super cool. We're gonna do. Hold on. Let me go over to the giveaway tool. Let's go. We're gonna make it easy. You got to make. Hold on. We are gonna go with. All right. Let me click this. All right. Let me share my screen. Hold on. Let me come back here. I'm gonna share my screen so you can go present. Share screen. And what am I gonna do here? A Chrome tab. Let's go giveaway tool. And you guys will be able to see my screen here. What we're going to do. Hashtag Foxy.
I was going to say, it's hit all illicit files.
I was going to go Weensy, but then I go, man, somebody might get one N and not two N's. And all right. So guys, if you type Foxy in the chat, you'll be entered in the giveaway. And this is to a single winner, and you have to be present to win. So if you're here and then you leave, and then when I select, you're not here, you don't win. That's just how it goes. Hashtag Foxy gets you in the drawing here. We got about 40 people in and out of chat here. It gets you in. Somebody put Foxy Lady. I love it. Gets you in the drawing to win a dozen hand-tied jigs from Mike, which is a super generous donation. That's super. I feel like I want to type in Foxy myself, but I don't. I'm not going to do that. But I want somebody to win. So you guys, if you're in here, hashtag Foxy in chat gets you in the drawing. So we'll let these accumulate for a while. So it's so interesting, the different materials, and I kind of started laughing when people were kind of coming out of the woodwork with all the different. What was my favorite one? Somebody asked about hedgehog. I think somebody asked about hedgehog, but it's funny. I did not talk about this, Mike, but one of the replies when we were talking about squirrel is people were talking about using it as a replacement for bucktail sometimes, and that it also works really well in dubbing loops. So you guys in chat, if you don't know what a dubbing loop is, it would basically be when you would be tying a jig. You would create a loop that would hang down from that jig area and then go back and tie back up. So you'd have a loop, you'd put a little bit of weight on it, and within that loop, it's taut now. You would place material within that loop, and then when you're done with that, you're going to wrap it around, and you should watch a video. Type in dubbing loop, and you'll see it in action, any type of short little video. But it's a cool way to add a different type of flaring and as uniform as you would want it, depending on how you put the material in. But you should watch a video on it. I don't think I could verbally explain it probably and do it justice, but there's a lot of opportunity for using different material. And so even if you don't tie, at least you start. Mike, you remember last night we were talking about this? Even if you're not a tire, if you at least put yourself in a situation where you're understanding material. So when you go to buy jigs from people, you want to know what the material does and start to understand that different materials are going to do different things. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking a jig maker about some of those features of their jigs, and kind of learning before you decide to make purchases. And I will say this, like, even it could be Mike, it could be On the Fly, it could be anyone. A lot of these guys that make jigs, if you send them a message on Instagram, they would answer your questions, you know.
I know
Um,
I will.
yeah, I mean, and the thing is, that's the whole point of, the Jig Squad stuff, is that people are in a situation where they're able to ask questions and find things out. Gators already thinks he won. We didn't draw yet, Gators. Not yet, brother. I have to keep looking and going back and see it. So we're at 31 entries. We got 43 people in the room right now. So if you have not entered, go ahead, man. It's 12 hand-tied jigs by Mike. I'd like to get a few more of you a chance to try and get in on this. If you're in chat, sometimes what happens is people are in chat and they walk off and they're helping around the house and different things like that. So those types of things happen. So we got 31. I'll give you guys another minute. See if we can get somebody in. If you haven't gotten in, get in here. You're going to win. You got a good chance of winning 32. That's good. Anyone else in? You got about a minute. Yeah, Will's saying, yeah, Brian and them from On the Fly, they make a lot of good stuff. The important thing is this, guys, a couple things. One, support of jig makers and creators happens a lot of different ways, right? So I don't care if you're buying things from the people we've had on the show over the last year. I don't care if it's following them on social media. I don't care if it's buying a sticker from Jig Squad. It doesn't matter. I don't care what it is. Find a way that you could support other people, and your thank yous doesn't always have to be about like mega bucks. I mean, find little ways to do things that are, kind and supportive for individuals. And I think that goes a long way in terms of the experience. So I know this, if anyone ever has questions about jig tying stuff, just keep message me. If I ever miss things or you don't hear back from me, I try and reply back. If you want to talk on the phone, I would always try and do that too. I just want people to have a good experience with stuff. Yeah, you guys, I feel like there's a lot of freaking killer winners in here tonight. All right, we're up to 35. All right, so we're close. 45. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds, and then we're going to go over and do this drawing. Mike, you good with that?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
Anyone else? Last seconds. Foxy, hashtag Foxy in chat to get in the drawing. If you've already entered, it's recorded you. You don't get extra entries. Excuse my stumbling of words. All right, we're going to draw. So I'm going to click this, and then we're going to go draw. Here we go. Look, you can see it on screen. This is great. I love it. Who's our winner? Winner, chicken dinner. The Adgram. All right, let's see. Adgram, are you in here, Bubba? Let's see. We'll see. So if you're in chat, Adgram, you have to reply in chat so we know you're here. And then Mike will tell you how to get a hold of him so he can get your address and all the particulars.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Oh, yeah. Oh, Adgram's here. All right, Adgram, listen, do me a favor too. I want to make sure that you turn out to be the winner. So I think what most people usually say, when you send Mike a message, make sure you take a screenshot of your YouTube name and login, because you actually have one, because you have a name here. So on your YouTube page, make sure you take a screenshot of your name so he knows it's you. And Mike will know, so it's not some shenanigans of somebody trying to imitate and pretend it's a winner chicken dinner. So, yeah. Mike, that was super nice, buddy. 12 jigs is a freaking really, really nice little stash and a usable thing for somebody. So,
yep. Adgram, just message me on Instagram or Facebook at Fishing with Weensy, and I will get you a dozen of these.
That is super cool, buddy. Here, Mike, I'm gonna make you big here. Hold that up.
Sure.
Beauties. All right, this is good. This will be a good lead-in question too here, Mike. Here's my lead-in question. Because I look and I see this and I remember I wanted to ask about this. All right, so you tie, I'm just gonna say majority, because that's what I observe, of your hair jigs on ball head jigs, correct?
Yep.
Tell me why you have chosen the ball head jig is your predominant everyday tie.
Ease of access, the fact that I go through so many, and I do not pour for myself anymore. I
Okay.
have years, um, so it's easy to get. It's economically friendly, um, and it comes to the rocks relatively well. I do.
It's a good answer. And so here's a good question. Bass Fishing Junkie says, does Mike sell his hats?
I actually do. Yeah, dude. I
That's so great.
I ran a run of these, man. I got like 5 just for myself in all these different colors, and so many people asked me if they could buy them that I just did a larger run. And I kid you not, man, I sold out of the hats in 2 days.
Did you really?
Legit, man. I got to do another run of them. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how quickly I
if
these,
if
dude.
they so I would say that Bass Fishing Junkie, subscribe to Mike on Instagram. Mike, is that the best way? And
Yeah,
uh
whatever.
yeah, and then you'll hear when they're on sale. Hell,
Yeah,
Bass, I gotta put this up, Brohim. I appreciate you so much, dude. HB says, he goes, it's been a minute since I've been on a Jig Squad live. Congrats on 1K. Yeah, you thank you, HB. Yes, dude. I
way to go, Kuda.
my Jig Squad peeps, we hit a K. So onward, onward and ready for 2023. So
Yeah, man.
and I'm going to talk about that more next week. You got not next week. I think it's the 29th. I am doing my 1-year anniversary show on the 29th. We're going to have fun. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm almost certain that I'm not bringing a guest on. Just going to let it roll, and it's going to be a behind the scenes of Jig Squad and my experiences over the year. And you know what it is? I just gotta kind of tell my story. I want to tell people a couple stories that happened along the way behind the scenes with Jig Squad over the year, and just give you guys a little insight into the world of Jig Squad that you guys may not have heard about. And maybe you guys are like, well, screw you, Kuda. We don't want to hear your story. Well, that's fine. Don't come to my damn stream then. I and to me that show on the 29th is a big deal. And I will tell you all why on the 29th. It's a big deal because like of what the year was to me, right? And so what that all looked like. So I'm super excited about that. It's funny how it all lined up, like it just came together here at the end. And to hit 1,000 is a big deal. You hit little stumbling blocks along the way. But to be honest with you guys, to do it with 32 live shows and hit 1,000 subs in a year is a big deal, I think. And I think I busted my hump, and I'll tell more about that as we get to it. So a comment here, Brian Schmidt says, Mike, ball heads are versatile is all get out. And I had to tell you guys, I have immersed myself in the jig making experience for a lot of years, and I make a lot of different type of jigs. But I'm going to tell you something. I would give them all up and only fish a ball head jig for everything if I could. And
You can't swim a football head, right? You can, but it just ain't right.
you
But
can,
still ball head.
it's so funny that you said this, because I literally just today, Ben Nowak, my buddy, and a lot of you guys know Ben. Ben puts out a video today about swimming a 3-inch Kitech Easy Shiner on a half-ounce football head in 25 plus feet of water.
Well, you're talking about bottom contact swimming.
Yes, and bottom contact. But
water swimming.
yeah, it's crazy because I love a ball head jig, and I do for a lot of different reasons. And I fish a lot of different stuff, guys. I got enough molds that I can make it look like the wall's painted. But that ball head jig is just I simply love it. All right, I'm scrolling through comments here. What else did I miss? So Anthony asks, it's a good question. He goes, do you ever use a plug knocker to get your custom jigs back? I would be way too emotional losing as many as you do. What's your answer to that? Are you snapping them off because you're the guide and you got so many? Or what are you doing?
Oh, I'm snapping them off like crazy, man.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
90% of the time I'm throwing these on 6-pound fluoro. You know, you don't want to get over the fish. You could just, I mean, you could ruin a whole spot. You know, I mean, you can catch 25 pounds off of a spot in 5 casts, but if you get hung up on it and go up on top of them to get your jig out of it after catching one, you're never going to catch another one.
That's a very good comment right there.
So it's worth it to me to keep the fish, you know, unapprised of my presence.
Well put.
I mean, it's just, that's the name of the game. If you're fishing a hair jig on the bottom counting rocks like I do so frequently in the spring and winter, you're gonna lose a ton of jigs. It's just gonna happen. Be prepared.
It's and you guys listen, I this is what I'll say too. So if you're not a jig maker out there, right? But yet you like this show and you like to the whole discussion of this experience. One of the things you can do, whether it be on eBay or wherever else, go get yourself some jig heads, right? And just get plain unpainted jig heads. And you could buy a bottle of Protect paint. And I've said for many years, you could get by for the rest of your life and be complicated with black, white, chartreuse, and green pumpkin. Those 4 colors could live your life as a fisherman. They really could. And you could spend, buy 4 bottles of paint. You could buy your jigs from somebody else and get yourself a $30, $40 little vise. And if you need help picking a starter vise out, text me or send me a message on Instagram or at jigsquadfishing at gmail.com. And I'll help you kind of get yourself squared away. And then you buy some thread, you buy a bobbin, and you just learn to tie. And people will help you, and I think that's one of the things. Just get started. And it's the point of entry is not as much as people think, I always say that if you like it and you really enjoy it, then you should pour your own lead, right? There's simple things you can do. Like I'll tell you like an easy way to do it. Like the new Dual Molds has like new little kits on their site right now that I calculated one out for an Arky head jig, which is like a pitching jig, right, guys? They have a little kit right now. They have one for the Midwest Finesse, Arky head, the Freestyle mold, which is one of my favorites. They have a little kit out right now that's the mold, the hooks you need for the mold, and a small mini lead pot and the lead for like $100 and some bucks. And you could get whatever, you could get your way a point of entry in a very easy way to do it. But if you don't want to pour lead, don't. And buy your jigs from somebody else. Look at Mike. Mike said he's not pouring anymore.
No, I don't mess with it, man. I just don't like being around lead. And I don't have the proper ventilation set up for it. It's just not. I used to I worked in a tackle shop for years, cleaning, pouring, cleaning jig heads and pouring all of them. And, that's how we spent our winters basically. It's just nasty stuff. So if you're doing it, make sure you have the proper ventilation and you're using clean lead. That's a big thing.
Mike, when you're out in the boat, I think somebody, Darkman, asked the questions, how many jigs are you taking with you on an average fishing trip? You're probably your boat's loaded with boxes, probably, would you say?
I get crap for this all the time, man. And guys make fun of me for this. because I like a lot of my buddies will make fun of me and poke jokes at me, but I'll bring just a monster Ziploc bag just back to the gills.
That's usually my tube bag. My tubes I put in there when I'm going on somebody else's boat in a sandwich bag.
and, and I'm just ripping through them, and I keep it in my pocket.
It's so great.
So every single time because I mean, oh man, I got stories where it's like you cast and you're already hung up before you even move the jig a foot, you know, and you'll do that 10 casts in a row and just want to bash your own head in. But keeping them in your pocket makes it so much easier to just continue to access and retie, and that's why I use straight fluoro too when I fish a hair jig so much, because you know you break off and retie. I'm not dealing with retying leader. Nope.
Right.
Continuously, you know, chopping off 2-3 feet of fluoro, you know, every single time I break off. And I go through a lot of line though. I will say that.
Yeah. I'm gonna put this up and I already know the answer to this, but I'm gonna give you a chance to, and we talked about this last night too.
Oh, okay.
Here's the question, Mike. What is your favorite hook for hair? Go ahead, give them your honest answer. It's okay. You want me to answer for you?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll answer for you. So, I'll be honest with you guys, I don't know the answer, but I will tell you this. I know that I've been around Mike for a while and I've seen Mike in other shows and stuff. Mike doesn't talk about what hooks he uses in his jigs. They're sharp and they catch fish. And I'm going to say this because I just want to hear you guys hear me say this. I think it's fine that people decide that they're not going to give away the farm and everything they do, because they've got to keep some things for themselves. And Mike, that's the one thing that Mike doesn't share is what hook he uses. What about sizes? Do you talk about those that much, Mike? What's like standard sizes for hair? Would you is that
either,
not in your realm of discussion?
oh, we can talk about that. I use either a 1 or 1/0 pretty much.
Yeah, see, that's me too. It's a 1 or a 1/0, and I tend to lean towards a 1/0 mostly.
Occasionally a 2/0.
Yeah.
That's usually if I'm tying like a little hybrid finesse jig that's specifically usually for largemouth. But I still tie the little hybrid deal. Talked about that a bunch. So
Oh yeah, let's make that big.
a little I call that the scrimp. And
Love
that
it.
that's a 1/0 usually.
1/0. Okay. Yeah, some guys want to know this stuff. Brian Wisniewski's asking, what do you use, Mike, for rod, reel, line? You know, what are your other parts of your setup that you use?
Depends on, you know, what I'm doing, whether I'm like reeling marabou or if I'm dragging. If I'm dragging, it's usually 7 foot or shorter, medium light. I use the X Pride. Usually the Shimano X Pride is a go-to for me. That 610 medium light is really nice. I've used I use a Kistler rod pretty frequently.
Okay.
Gilliams and the Z Bones. Also the Feel and Reel series is not that bad. I think
Nice.
610 drop shot rod that's really nice. But any, you know, 610 to 7 foot. Some guys like a 6.6. Not me personally. I like
No, it's a casting distance thing to me.
I like the 610. Or 7 foot if I have to go up to that. But there's something about a lot of those 610 length rods that I really like. I don't know if it's just the feel of it in my hand or
Yeah.
you know, weighing the fish. I'm really not sure. But always medium light, always super sensitive, always kind of whippy.
Mm-hmm.
And I say kind of whippy because you're dealing with a super fine point hook. You don't need to drill that hook home at all. I barely set the hook when I'm fishing hair jig. I basically just reel into them and pull up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar to a drop shot hook set. and you got to be kind of quick with it too, because sometimes they'll just pick it up and spit it out. But that's pretty much it. 2500 series reel, 2500 size is my typical spinning reel I'm using. Whatever you guys prefer. And then, like I said, I use straight six. That
Nice.
seems to be it. Sometimes I'll even go down to 4. But 6 is, really nice and supple, and helps with casting distance and helps keep the jig down on the bottom. And
Sure. Yep. Adam, your good buddy Adam here, he's finding a way to get his own dozen Mike Iovino jigs, and he said he's going magnet fishing at the Candlewood rock piles. He's gonna get 12 Mike Iovino jigs for free.
you might more like I don't know, 1200.
You might. There's a few more out there. It was many years out there fishing. Mike, this has been a fun time, bud. This was great, dude. I learned a lot tonight. And I hope everyone in chat learned a lot here too, guys. Mike, I would like to get you back on this spring sometime and next year again. You guys listen, follow along, and if you're not on Instagram, get on Instagram. You just need to be able to see and stay in touch with a lot of these designers that I like to have on. Mike, again, links are available down below. This is we have to go back. How is Adgram gonna get a hold of you? Adgram, you still in here? This is Mike's Instagram. Let me go back in the chat. Adgram, are you still in here? Somehow you got to get a hold of Mike, which I think we said earlier. So you've got to figure out how to do that.
I think you are, to be honest with you. So
what's that, Mike? Say again.
I'm pretty sure he already messaged me.
He said, okay, he probably did, because he made the comment that he bought jigs from you last year too.
So okay.
good for him. Good for him. Mike, a lot of people saying a lot of good things in chat. Nice to meet you. Great show, great information tonight. So I was very excited about tonight, and I actually am more excited. I thought I was going to be most excited about talking about bear, but to be honest with you, I was more excited about the other materials. It was a good show, buddy. Stay in chat. We're going to end it, you guys. Mike, anything else for the crew before we get out of here?
No, man, it's been a pleasure. If anybody is in the area, the vicinity of Candlewood or Westchester County, New York, or at all in Connecticut, feel free to get in touch with me to try and get on my calendar if you're looking for guide trips or anything like that for the spring. If you're looking for hair jigs, feel free to message me and try. I can't guarantee you. I'm not making any commitments, but I have been swindled into selling probably like 12 or 13 dozen already that have already been shipped out. So
there's your tip, guys.
It's, if I have the time, I will get to it, but I can't guarantee that I'll have the time. So
there you go.
There you go.
Mike, thanks. Stay in chat, buddy. After we end this, I'll chat with you offline for a few minutes here before we go. But you guys, this has been Jigsquad. A great time tonight. I really enjoyed this show. I've been looking forward to getting Mike and on for a long time. We are back on the 29th of December with the 1-year anniversary show. I'll post some point in time, but meantime, hit the subscribe button. I appreciate you all. And this is the Jigsquad experience. We're going to be out of here. Thanks, folks.